A British lawmaker, Andy Burnham, says he will stand to replace Keir Starmer as Prime Minister and Labour Party leader, a day after he announced his resignation. Mr. Burnham, who was recently sworn in as an MP for Makerfield, is widely seen as a frontrunner to succeed Mr. Starmer.
The outgoing leader will remain in office until a successor is chosen. Reports say Britain could have a new Prime Minister in less than a month if no challenger emerges. Stuart Smith with this report for CNA.
Andy Burnham is looking increasingly likely to become the next UK Prime Minister, with Keir Starmer out of the race, as well as former Health Secretary Wes Streeting, who had previously said he would stand. Burnham arrived in London on Monday from his home city of Manchester, where he spent the last 9 years as mayor.
I made my statement, obviously praising the Prime Minister's dedication, service, and confirmed that I will put myself forward in the process that will soon be underway.
He was back in the British capital to take his oath of office and join around 400 of his colleagues as a new Labour MP. But after winning a decisive by-election last week, it's clear many of them already see him as the next PM. The outgoing Prime Minister, who will remain in power until a new leader is elected, said he'd got the message.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. I have heard the answer of my parliamentary party to that question, and I accept that answer with good grace.
He then laid out the official timeline for the Labour Party leadership competition. Nominations would open in early July, the competition would take over a month, and a new Prime Minister would take over in September. But it's hard to see who else could gain the needed support to challenge Burnham, so at this point that competition could be a formality. Opposition party Reform UK say there should be a general election, that Burnham has no mandate from the British people. But it isn't unusual in British politics for the leader to change between elections, with the next one not due to be held for more than 3 years, which means Andy Burnham, last week Mayor of Manchester, this week national lawmaker, could next month be Prime Minister. For CNA, I'm Stuart Smith in London.
For more on this, let's chat now with Ben Wellings. He's Associate Professor of Politics and International Relations at Monash University. Prof. Wellings, thank you so much for joining us. So the British press, and you heard our correspondent there talking about Burnham as though he's a near certainty. But my question is, between now and July 9th and perhaps July 16th, can anything still go wrong for him?
Good morning, Arnold. No, look, I think if the main other candidate, who was the former Health Secretary called Wes Streeting, has stepped down, he was the only person I think that could really challenge Burnham. So at this stage, I think the Labour Party will want as clean a transition as possible. There is an argument that you might want to have a contest so you can test people's ideas, but I think changing a sitting Prime Minister is not the same as changing a leader in opposition. And so I suspect this will be a coronation rather than a contest, and the so-called King of the North will become the British Prime Minister by mid-July.
So, I mean, we are already hearing Nigel Farage arguing that voters should get a say through a general election. But how comfortable do you think the British public would be with the Burnham entering number 10 without going back to the electorate?
Well, thanks, Julie. I mean, there's a risk for certain in changing your Prime Minister, not even after a first full term and not with an election. This being said, there's nothing wrong with a party changing its leader in the Westminster system. You know, the Westminster system rewards. The Prime Minister is the person who can command a majority in Parliament, and whether that person changes or not is in some ways immaterial. But a party like Reform UK, led by Nigel Farage, is much more leader focused. But technically speaking, there's no need to have another election just because the Prime Minister has changed. And I think it would be probably in the Labour Party's interests not to go down that particular path, because they will want whatever Burnham does in his first 100 days in office to have some effect before going to the polls again. So this is really just Reform and Nigel Farage trying to sort of put some pressure on the Labour Party, because Burnham's success against Reform is going to cause a serious problem for the success of Nigel Farage's party.
We will learn of Mr. Burnham's agenda in the next few days or weeks at Burnham, but we know that he has built a pretty strong reputation in Greater Manchester. But governing a city region is very different from governing the country. Just how much room does he actually have to change policy, given weak growth, pressure on public services, immigration concerns, and so on?
Well, that's a really great question, and I think that is the key question. It's really about whether a leader, a new leader, can offset some of the structural problems that you have identified. So, on the one hand, one of the qualities of the leader in the current media environment is a certain sort of personability or a way of connecting with voters who have many different ways of understanding politics, and some of which are, deliberate mis and disinformation that is circulating in that media ecosystem. I think Burnham does have some of those qualities, and which unfortunately Keir Starmer didn't quite have. But at the same time, it's going to be difficult to make some changes. I think there are some visible things that he could do that are very, nationalise the water utilities is going to be a popular move. Renationalise, the trains are being renationalised. Even working with local councils to fill potholes in the road is a very visible and symbolic way of showing that things are changing. But it's a difficult time to become a prime minister, and as you pointed out, the room for manoeuvre is limited.
I'm glad you brought that up, Professor Wellings, because is he going to get 100 days? I'm wondering how patient the British public is going to be before they say, look, we've had enough. We need someone else.
Yeah, another great question. And of course, the more leaders you work through, the more impatient people become because they think that the change is impossible. It's not impossible to kind of turn this sort of thing around. If you might remember, Australia was a byword for leadership turmoil back in the 2010s, and that seems to have stabilised. So it's not impossible that a leader can make a difference, but the electorate is impatient now. There's less time for politicians to communicate that change takes time, and that is a commodity which is in scarce supply in contemporary politics. So yes, it will be difficult for Burnham, and he needs to not squander whatever honeymoon period the British electorate will give him.
Understood. The other question I have, Professor Wellings, is whether or not Andy Burnham is ready. Yes, he's been in the cabinet, but here's what we know. He's committed to no hikes in taxes and premiums, but recently, declined in a BBC interview to name the government's fiscal rules and also refused to answer questions about national policy. So are you concerned, on that front as well?
I think his team would have liked a little bit longer before he got into 10 Downing Street. This being said, you've just got to kind of learn on the job. I think the situations are not ideal. Successful leaders seem to have long apprenticeships in politics, and as you've mentioned, Burnham is coming at this slightly obliquely from being mayor of Greater Manchester. Boris Johnson did the same thing as mayor of London and eventually became prime minister. Whether that's a good omen or not, it depends on your politics, I guess. But I think that there's going to be a very fast learning curve and a step up from being mayor of Greater Manchester. Successful though Burnham largely was in that role, to a very different beast in the United Kingdom, which is a multi-party democracy with 4 different nations and lots of discontent. So yes, it will be a quick learning curve for him, no doubt.
Indeed, we did touch on the domestic side of things, but I wonder how prepared do you think Mr. Burnham is for the foreign policy and security challenges, especially at a time of war in Europe and Iran and growing global instability?
Yeah, of course, the view from outside of the UK, I think Burnham's pitch is very much to voters in Britain, but specifically Northern England. From the outside, one of the things that Starmer did seem to be good at was foreign relations. So it's not impossible that he could be offered the foreign secretary's role, and we see him more on the world stage as a foreign secretary rather than as a prime minister. So yes, again, I think being mayor of even a major city in the UK doesn't necessarily prepare you for foreign affairs, and we know that that is a challenging environment at this very moment in time.
Okay, Professor Wellings, we'll have to leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insight this morning. Ben Wellings, Associate Professor of Politics and International Relations at Monash University.